your concerns in previous class. So in OOPS, Shiva, Vamshi, Surinder, Ron, Purushottam.
Maybe I have to watch the video. I didn't watch the video from yesterday, so
Okay,
maybe,
Shiva.
I'll do it the weekend. I didn't get time to do that, so
No issues. You can just go through that today, maybe, yeah, and we can have a discussion. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So that was our OOPS and different concepts we had, right? Let's move on to the next topic, which is exception handling. So exception handling, basically we talk about mainly the runtime errors here. So what is the difference between a runtime error and a design time error, or a design time error?
Runtime errors takes place after.
Yeah. Go on, Rob.
Yeah, it takes place during the time the program is being run. Runtime error.
Yeah.
And then and I guess the other question was compile time errors.
Yeah, design time or compile time. Yeah, perfect. Design time or
Right.
compile time. Yeah.
During compilation time.
Yeah.
Or the time of compilation. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. So runtime error is something when you are actually running your class file. So during the execution, you will be getting some exceptions, and design time or compile time is whenever you are actually preparing the class file, right? So you'll be getting, so that is nothing but your design time. So the design time errors we have already seen. So let me create a project. So here, let's create class. So let's give a heads up today. Main. So you would have seen that when I say int I is equal to some G, right, when I give some character over here, right? So basically in Eclipse you can see this, right? In Eclipse you can directly see something when I actually give some string here, right? You can directly see, because Eclipse internally, whenever you save your program, right, automatically it compiles your program, right? So which means your compilation is complete done in whenever you save, right? So that's why you can just see this that there is some mismatch or all. So these are nothing but your compile time errors or something which is design time error, right, which can be caught during development itself, right? And runtime errors are something which is you will get out of the logic you have written, or something which is uncontrollable, or you would have never thought of it, or something, right? So based on that, runtime errors will occur. So that is what we have something called an error. So the two different ways how we can get these errors. Now, basically in Java, it's throwable class, which is which is used for which is an object for the exception class, right, under which the division is being done. Like the division is like they have divided it into error and something called exception. Now, what is the difference between error and exception? Like theoretically they may be same, but technically they are far there is a much difference in between these two, because error is something which can happen in uncontrollable situations. Like we will not have hold of what actually is happening, though that is error. And exception is something which can happen because of the logic you have written, or because of the output you are getting out of your logic, right? So that is what we have exception, where you can have a hold on exception, where again under exception there will be something, there is something like you can have something like checked exception and unchecked exception, where So if you are using your Eclipse, right, Eclipse will give you Eclipse have got very good support of giving suggestions like which type of exception to use. So what is the checked and unchecked here? So checked exception is something which you have to, whenever you are writing any logic, right, you have to use that some type of exception there. So let us say you are doing something on database connections or some file operations or some streaming operations or some thread operations, right? So these are some situations where you have to check some exceptions, which is whenever you are working with a file, right, let me just take up an example to differentiate these two. Yeah, let us take up a file example. Let us say your application is continuously logging something where your application is continuous, like whenever any event or any sort of action happens, right, so that will be logged into your file, let us say, right. So what is error is, let us say your file is growing a lot, like you haven't handled anything in code, that you haven't seen or you haven't handled the size of your file. So continuously what you are doing is you are just logging whatever you are getting into your file. Now sometime there will be one permissible level where your file will be so huge that even your first thing is the processing will be so slow, because when you are trying to append something to a file, and if it is already huge, it will kill your CPU time. And second thing is this is the main thing, where your hard disk may be may get full because of this file, right? At that time your program will not have enough space to run because of this file getting completely filled up with the hard disk, where you have to completely kill your program first, right? Delete all the logs and append some memory to your server or do something. So that is uncontrollable, right? As your file is growing, that is uncontrollable, so which is called as an error, right? You cannot control your memory there, because memory can be only finite memory. If you want to add more memory, you have to add it dynamically, or you have to add based on the alerts you are getting, right? That is nothing but an error. Now what is an exception? Exception is, let us say you have a file and you are trying to log into it, right? So whenever you are trying to log or write into some file, if the file is not there, so what will happen? That is an exception. You are writing a logic to access a file which is not there, which is an exception. So what should you do there? At least you have to check whether your file is there or not, and then do something called logging, right? So that is called as exception, because exceptions we are getting out of the logic we have written, right? So that is the main difference between this error and exception, right? And checked and unchecked is, checked is something which you will be checking. Let us say if you are writing a file exception, you will be knowing these two terms once we actually move on and try some exception handling, right? So checked is something which is used, like you have to check for sure. Let us say if you are working with a file, right, file not found is an exception, which is you have to check that, right? And what is unchecked? Unchecked is something, let us say there is an array. There is an array int, right? Int I is equal to new int of some, let us say 3, right? So the size of or the length of this array is 3. So when I try to call I of 5, let us say, right? So during design time or during writing a logic, you will never notice that you are going out of out of the boundary levels of your array, right? You will never know. Sometimes maybe you are getting this part of index from it is generated dynamically based on some logic, let us say, right? And that logic is generating your value which is higher than your maximum permissible level of your array, and even there you are not checking your array length, let us say, right? Then what happens? This is something which will give you one more type of exception, which is unchecked. We'll never know. We know that we'll be getting this out of our logic itself, but even that is something which is uncontrollable, right? You can control this by checking your size, which is I dot length, let us say, right? If I dot length is less than 3, you can check this, then do this. Or I, in the sense, let us say x, let me take it as x, right? which is you can at least check here that you want to access your I array with the permissible index which is at least less than 3, right? Which is you're just controlling this. So this can happen, this same situation can happen without any type of logic. So that is nothing but unchecked logic, right? So these are two types of error things we have, and let's move on to something called exception, right? Exception. Now, so this word or this exception is why this is very important is exception. So whenever you are writing a program, right, whenever you are writing a program, if anything happens in between the program execution, right, like let me just take out this, and I is equal to, right, some 10 and x is equal to some 20, right? I'll just say public void, right, something like name try catch, oops, not try catch, name, and we have something int, we're getting int a here. Let me just, so here what I'm getting is, when I have int x is equal to something like 20, let us say, and I want int z is equal to, I want to divide it x divided by 8. Just taking an example here, and here I'm passing my print name, let me do the static name with I, right? I'm just passing I. So what I'll say, I'll just say sys out of set, and I'll say sys out of, yeah, the solution is clear, something, right, just something, and I'll just give one more statement, which is move to next. So here, so what we have done is we are checking out something where, you know, we are just calling a method name, and we're just sending something over here, right? So let us see what happens here. Now initially we'll just send 10 over here. Let me run this. When you see, you can see that, yeah, your z have got, and you have whatever statements after that, whatever is there, is clear now. Now let me send 0 here. When I send 0 here, when I run up, right, can you see here? So whenever you get any exception here, you have got one exception, which is divide by 0, because divide by 0 will give you something called infinite value. You will get something called infinite values, and in any programming language there is no variable which can hold your infinite set of values, right? So that is not possible at all. So that's why what happened, your exception happened at this place. Your exception happened at this place, and what happened, remaining part of the whole program got killed. So it didn't even, you know, touched upon remaining things, which means your program or the whole application got stopped at this place itself. So that is nothing but your hazardous, you know, exception can happen. So as of now, what we have seen is, we have seen something called divide by 0. You can see that divide by 0 is the exception you have got, and that exception is of type something called arithmetic exception, where you are trying to do something which is not permissible here. And what happened due to this, all your next set of programs got skipped up, and your complete application got killed at this point. So that is what we have something called exception, what we have got now. So why it is very important to, you know, handle exception is, the reason is this. So whenever exception happens, at that point your execution stops, and the remaining part of the whole application will be killed up abruptly, right? So that's why wherever you feel that there can be something which can be tweaking, some tweaking can happen, there you have to make sure to handle some exception. Now the big question is how to handle an exception. So to handle an exception, we have some predefined tokens called try, catch, and finally. So these are the three main classes or main objects we have in exception class, like using which we can actually catch an exception. Now the basic syntax of try, catch, finally is this. Let me just give a basic syntax first. Let me just say I have one more method, public void, so check exception. So the basic syntax of try catch is try, open flower bracket, close flower bracket, right, and just say catch of. So here what you are doing is, whenever you say try, right, which means you are exciting something called JVM's exception class. So which means your JVM's exception class will start the supervision from this point, try. In the sense, try for any exception can happen. So whatever you write in between will be under supervision of your exception class, and then your catch. If anything exception happens, it will directly come to your catch. Let me write up here, which is catch of. You can have any exception here and some a. You can take any variable, and you can have your finally here. We'll come to finally sometime later. Let's first understand what is try catch now. So this is the basic syntax of your try, catch, and finally, which is basically used for exception handling and doing something if any exception happens. Now, so let us use the same thing in here and see what happens here. Right? Let us say we know that so here whatever set of programs you write, right, and in between these try and catch block, so only that part of your code will be under supervision of your exception, which is known thing. Now how this exception class works is, whenever you are try, which means you are asking your JVM to start supervising exception from here. So which means, so whatever you have written inside this block of this try catch, so the supervision at each and every part of your compilation or execution, it will check for whether there is an exception. So now let us say at the step 2 an exception happens. What will do? It will directly stop here, and your compiler hand will go to directly to the catch. So now here you have to handle your exception. So handling exception can be anything, like you can log your exception, or you can show your exception. We'll come to this part later, right? Now, so what can happen here? So is a question. Now let us use the same thing in here, right? Firstly, we know that an exception can happen in this, right? So let's keep them in something called try catch supervision. Now in Eclipse, when you just type in try control space, you'll get two things, whether you want only try or try catch back. Click on that, you will be getting the whole syntax of your try catch, right? Let me just cut it up and paste around the last one. Now you can see that we have used try and catch, which is, now what we are doing is we are trying to supervise, something which is, we know that something can happen here, and I don't want to stop the complete execution. I want to do something in here. Now in exception class, exception is a class which is actually the highest level of exception. We'll come to this later. So here let me just say I want to see what error can happen. So how to check out that is, so whatever exception happen here, right, here in between the piece of code in between try and catch, the whole information will be caught up and will be sent to this method, which accepts something called argument E, or exception, or this E is of type exception. This contains the whole information, which means if you just say E dot see, you can see this get message or get stack trace, right? These things are something which will give you what is the exception you have got, and just say sys ERR. So this is ERR something which is we have seen till now sys out, right? Sys err is again the same thing. It will write a line, but it will write a line in a red color. Let us check this out. Right, now let me run this. So my goal here is to catch something in here and keep my program running. Now let me run this. You can see my exception happened here. It directly came to something called catch, and here I am handling something. Let me just write here that got exception, right, and some data here, right. Let me just append this up and run this. You can see got exception, right, and the exception is what is the message is divided by 0. It is not possible. And here again what you can see that it got stopped again here, and it came to the next part of your program, right, next part of the program. But what we want is, whenever exception happens, I want to run the remaining part of my program, but it is not happening here, right? So for that, what you have to do, so you have to handle that. Now we know that an exception can happen only at this place, right? So which means handle your exception at this part, and after this just cut it up, and you can do in two things. One, keep everything outside try catch, right, outside try catch, and see, okay, so once an exception happens, do something and resume the next part of program, right? Now here we'll see this now. So this Z, you can see that this is giving error. So why it is giving error? The scope here again, the scope of the variables which you define inside try catch will be up till this, that's it. So let me just define this control Z before try catch, and let me just remove this, which is Z here, right. So now we are able to see the scope. Okay, it asks for initialize. Let me just initialize this to 0, right. So what we want is, we want the value of Z, which is X divided by something called A. Now let me run this. If you can see, right, so here what we have made sure, that we have executed whenever we got an exception. So it got to this and we got this print, but what is happening is, so the remaining block of code is not being disturbed. So remaining part will always run. Now, so what is important here to handle an exception? So here you can see, whenever exception happens, right, just say that your Z or A is got some 0, that's why you got an exception. You know that here your arithmetic exception can happen. So here just say, when exception happens, just say Z is equal to, let us say 15. I want the value to be at least 15, even if the division is happening or not, let us say. So that part you have to handle in something called your exception block or catch block here, right, which is this. So let me run this. You can see 15 here, because I'm printing the Z here, and exception happened here, which is got exception divided by 0. But even when exception happened, it directly came here, right, it printed something, and I have assigned my Z to 15 here, because if any exception happens, I want the value to be 15, and then remaining part of code got executed, right? So this is what we do.
Sorry, Srinath, I have a quick question, please.
Sure.
Actually, this is just a general question, a basic question.
Sure.
I don't actually, when I'm writing a program, right, I'm not able to actually, I actually don't know where to put these variable values. Let's say, I don't know where to write them, like after the class or before the class. Can you please clarify that?
Yeah, sure. So variables,
that's always bugging me. It's like confusing, right?
Okay.
Because sometimes I put it outside the class. You say it could be declared anywhere in the class, right? But sometimes I declare outside the class.
No, I said anywhere inside the class, right? I mean, I said you can declare a variable anywhere inside the class. You can also declare inside the class here. Let me just say int I is or int some ABC is equal to 20, let us say, right? It will accept. Why it will accept is, I am writing everything inside a class. You should not write outside a class. This is not possible actually. If I say int y is equal to 20, right, your stack memory will be created only for your class. Am I right, Shiva? Yeah. So what we are doing here is we are writing something out of this class, but basically whatever you want to write in Java, you have to write only inside a class, right? It is not possible anything apart from class. You will never be able to write a program, right? Whatever you want to do, you want to write a class. First point. Second point, you should not declare anything, a method or a variable outside a class. It should be at least inside this flower brackets, which is a class start flower bracket and class end flower bracket, right? And inside that you can declare this variable anywhere. So I declared, after writing methods, I declared here, right? Let me just access my ABC here. Let us say, let me write some sys. Okay, let us not touch this.
Yeah, I didn't write outside the class. I was writing in somewhere inside the class. But even though sometimes it was giving me some error, like
what was that? Where did you write your variable, Shiva?
Let's say below the public static void. Second line, I was trying to write some program, right?
Okay, here.
And then
okay.
Yeah.
You write it here.
But it should take after this, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It should accept, right?
Yeah, it will accept. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try tonight again.
Yeah, it is accepting, right? So here you have defined it here, right? I can also print it here. You can see here, sys out of, I can print this variable here, right? Because okay, anyways, it is, we have to wait static. See here, what we have taken is, let me just define at the end of all the methods, right? And I'm trying to get that ABC here, right? Let me run this. You can see 2 here, right? It doesn't matter where you are defining your variable. Wherever you define, what happens is this scope, the first ever entities being read by your stack memory is a variable, right? And then it will go to your main method. Whenever you create whenever your class starts, right? Whenever your main or something starts, basically the first ever thing what is started is your these things, which is nothing but your variable will be instantiated first, and then it will go to
now
main.
wait.
Yeah.
Now I see you have a static there. Can you take the static off?
Yeah, because if I take the static off, right, why we are getting error is this is a object variable.
Yeah, this is what I was getting. Yeah, this is what I was
okay. Yeah. That is what we have discussed, something called object variables and static or class variables. You should never use object variables inside a static methods, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it is not allowed. But you can use static variables inside a. So what is an object method or object method is, if you don't see, this is an object method. I'm not using static, right? This is public void. I'm not using. Here you can say sys out of ABC. I can say that because there is a non-class method or object method. Let me check one more variable, int xyz, which is static here, and let me just give 45, right? So again here I have defined one more variable. I can say sys out of some xyz here, because all your object variables and class variables are allowed in something called object method, or right? But in static methods or class methods, you are not supposed to use non-class methods. You should use always static, which means your static. You know the reason why it is not because for accessing your static methods and variables, right? You don't have to create an object, right? You don't have to create an object. Now, if you are not creating an object, which means you are not creating a separate heap memory for this, right? Which means if you are not creating separate heap memory, which means this will never come into picture. So that's why you are not supposed to use a object variable inside a class method, right?
Okay, if it's inside the static, right? Can I just use int abc equals to
yeah, you can always do inside abc, which means you are making this again a static again. Inside whatever variable you are defining, right? It again you are making them a static.
So if you are putting outside the class, outside the static class, it should be, you have to put a static before it.
Exactly. If you are trying to put these things outside, which means, and if you want to use them inside a static method, then you have to make it static, right? If I'm not planning to use anything here in static, right? You don't have to make it static, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this was the exact error message I had before.
Okay, fine.
It's like,
Okay, so now you're clear, Shiva, here? Yeah?
yeah.
Okay, super. Yeah, cool. Yeah, let's move on. Yeah. So that is where we have done something called try catch. Now, here we said something called finally, right? So finally is something which is a mandatory execution block, which is whatever happens to your program, whatever happens inside a try catch, right? It doesn't matter, it will come to catch and finally will be executed for sure. Let me just show you that. Let me just say I'm printing this set, and I say, yeah, this is out. I just say and finally, right? Okay, let me just keep these things outside. Control Z and yes, and finally I'll write this finally, right? So we have taken this. Now let us say I'm passing 0 or 10 first, which means when I pass 10, right, which means you want something x divided by 10, which is 20 divided by 10, which means you don't get any error here, right? Let me just say this is out of, let me just say no error here, because if you get any error here, right, this statement won't be executed, right? Which means if there is an error, it will directly go to something called catch block, right? First let us send 10 here. Let me just run this up. Yeah, and you can see that first it went to so how compilation happens is, how the execution happens is, print name, your compiler will come here. So okay, initialize Z, and then came here x is equal to 20. Now what we are doing, Z is equal to 20 by A is 10. So no exception here. Now it immediately printed no exception here, which is this. And then if you can see, immediately it went to finally. I'm in finally, and then it printed what is Z and remaining part of it. Now let us send 0 over here, which means you will get an exception here, and you should not get this no error here, right? Let me run this. You can see, so as soon as it came here, we got an error. That's why immediately it went to your catch, it printed got an exception, it assigned your variable Z with 15, and you can see immediately your finally got executed. This is a mandatory block of code which will be executed, and then remaining part of code got executed, right? So this is how you define a basic or a complete syntax of your try, catch, and finally is, right? So you guys have any sort of question up till here?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, Ron.
This is Ron speaking. Hi.
Yeah, Ron. Yeah.
How does it work with nesting? Like, are you able to nest?
We'll come to that. Yeah, we can do that.
Oh, you're coming to that?
Yeah.
And my second, okay, good.
Yeah.
My second question is, the exception E. You mentioned that this is the uppermost class that catches exceptions. So does that mean that is it good practice to use the exception, or should you be more specific?
We should be actually more specific. Yeah, even that is my next point. Yeah, we'll come to that. Yeah, we'll come to that.
Cool.
Both your questions will be answered now. Yeah, sure. That was a good question, and we'll come to that. Yeah. Any other question? Amshi, Shiva, Purushottam, Surender.
That's good.
Yeah, fine. So what we have seen is, we have seen the basic syntax and how actually it happens, an exception happens, and how finally works, and what is something which is out of your try catch supervision, right? And what is happening. Fine. So that is what it is, right? Now here, so let me just give one more thing here. When we write try catch finally here, right? Let us say you are sure that outside this try catch finally no exception happens. Let us say I'm just taking Z is equal to, again someone just came and wrote something this again, which means you so for you just thought of this Z is equal to X by A, I can get only error here. What happened here? You are making again something which is some other things here. Let me run this. You can see. So your program is completely messed up now. So but whatever happens, your finally will be executed. What see here, only I'm finally got executed. So what happened here? So whenever your program was running, right, you got an exception here, infinite exception, and it immediately went to catch, and it executed this, and immediately the finally got executed. Now immediately what we are writing is, we wrote something called z is equal to 5 divided by 0 again, which we are hard coding something, which means we know that we are doing this, but we are not handling exception again here. What happened? Again your part of code again got killed up. Now again what we should do? We should do some try catch for this. You know that this is a separate condition. If you are doing, just say try right catch here to your this line, which is z, right? So now if you feel that if any exception happens here, let us say I want z to be some 25, let us say, right, something where you are writing some program which is this try catch is different, your above try catch is different, and you're writing some block of code which you have to execute outside. You can do this in a program, in a method. You can write any number of try catches separately, right? What we have done is we have done separately. Now when you run this, you can see that you have your program came here z, and immediately it got an error, z got 15, and I'm finally got executed. When I am finally got executed, again it moved on, it went to this statement again, z is equal to 5 divided by 0, which is not correct. Again your z got assigned to 25. That's why when we printed z, it printed 25, right? And then it moved on to this, right? So this is how we actually declare something which is this. Again if you are defining your try catch separately, right, you can also have one more finally here. Finally is always tagged to your try. I'll say, let me just copy this and say I'm in second finally, right? You can do this. When you run this up, you can see that I'm in second finally, because after this execution your assignment you got an exception, I'm finally, and then we have 3 statement, which is 25, solution is clear, move to next. Fine, you can do these things, not a worry. Now let's move one step ahead now. So as per the Ron's question, right? So we, as of now, what we have seen is something called exception. Now here exception is a class which is under java.lang package, right? And this is a main class of all your underneath exception classes. So we have so many exception classes under exception, like you have something called we have seen some arithmetic exception, right? Arithmetic exception. You have something called IO exception, right, under which you have something called file not found, right, or something called file oversize, or file oversize. Just take up this. You can have the name as different, and you have something called array out of index, out of bounds, or out of index exception. You can have SQL exception, right? And you can have something called null pointer exception, right? So all these are something which are which are more specific to different type of exceptions. Now, so how they are defined is based on different logic you are writing. So as of now, what logic we are writing is, we are writing something called some arithmetic operation we are doing, which means so we'll be sure that some arithmetic exception can happen, which means specific to this, right? You can handle this. Now in the same way, let us say in the same program you are working with some arrays, let us say, right? Okay, let us take the new class so that let's not confuse with the same. Let us say some ex1 exception 1 class, right? Let's take up something, and let me write this main now, and just say public method void and just say MEQ1 something. Now here what we'll do, we'll write a try catch here. We'll write try catch, right? And what we'll do, we'll first do something called int I is equal to 10, right? And just say int z is equal to I divided by 0. Let's take up here itself. And in main method, let me just call met1, right? Yeah, okay, it should be static anyways. Right, so here we have called up one method, and what we are doing is we have only one type of exception till now. Now let us take one more int array here, int array. So here what we'll do, we'll just say int array arr is equal to new, right? So till this part it is one thing, and let us take up the next part, which is, yeah, you can have any name, so any much of code, right? Int, let me say 2. I just want the size to be 2 here, and what I'll do here, I'll just say int x is equal to, let us say arr of let me take 0 first, right? And here let me take something 2 here, and just say sys out of z is plus z, and sys out of, just say x is and sub is x. We have a small piece of code here where, so we have taken two different things. One is calculating something, and in some other part of your program is doing some array things, right? Now, so this part we are trying to go more specific of exception handling now, right? Because we have so many type of exceptions. So let us first see an arithmetic exception and array of out of bound exception as of now, right? So here, so we have written, so now first let us say we have only one class, which is a higher class or a top class of each and every exception class, which is exception. Let me just handle it here, sys err some exception here, and just say here e dot get message, right? Yeah, so this is what we have. Now let me run this first. So as of now everything is fine, right? Now first let me just take up this as 0, which means you will never get into this code because exception happens directly here, so nothing will be executed, right? When I run this, you can see direct exception divided by 0, so everything else got skipped. Fine. Now let me take it at 2 here and just say something like some 3 here, right? Which means when I run this, your z got printed because there is no exception till here. And when we got into these arrays, so we got something called, there is nothing here, right? Even if you say arr, let me just assign two values, is equal to 195 and arr of 1 is equal to 7205 something, right? Now what we'll do, we'll print these stuffs outside the program as of, we'll try out that, and just say int z, print it outside here, and take this x also just outside the class or the outside the try catch. Yeah, much better now. So now what we are saying is we just want to, you know, trace through the program here, and let's see what happens here now. So when we run this program, right, so each and every exception is being caught here, and we never know based on what exception you are actually catching the exception, right? So here sometimes your exception can happen at this place, and you may not have any exception here. When I say 0 here, right, which means this part of code is perfectly all right, but even then you are not able to catch this, right? So at this point of time, let us say, but you have to write everything in try catch, and if any exception happens, you want to try different values, let us say. So at that time, what you have to do is, here we can't handle, we can't say which exception got happened, right? So at that when you get that question, right, that is a point where you have to go for something called specific exceptions. Now, how to go for specific exceptions? So for one try, you can write any number of catches. So what does it mean? It means, let us say, first I'll write something called catch of, I know that this arithmetic exception can happen. Let me just take it as A and just catch, right? And again you can write one more catch here, where I know that something called array out of bounds can happen. Just type in that. Array index out of bounds exception, let me say AO, array out of, right? You can write any number. So among all, after writing specific exception, just go and write the top level exception, which is exception class, exception and E. So here what we are saying is, whenever any exception happens, I want to do something. Whenever array out of bounds exception, I want to do something, and whenever something else happens, I want to do something. So this is what you are doing now. So whenever your program is killed here, right, it will come here. Let me just print out that this is out of, let me just say I am in arithmetic exception, right? And just don't go into spellings, guys. I'm very poor with my spellings, right? I'll just say array out of index exception something, and I'll just say I'm in generic exception, right? Let's take up these things. Now first let me just say this one, I've taken my array, and let me just call 3 here, which is out of index. Let me run this. You can see here that it says I am in array out of bounds index. It directly came to something called this. Anyways, it will come to this catch. It sees whether it is an exception or not. No, it is not. It will directly go to your array out of index, and then it printed something, and then it came out. It won't go to exception class again. Only one exception, one catch will be executed only. It won't go to next catch, and it will come out and print something whatever we have. Huh? So let me debug this for you. Let me debug. So this is what I have placed some debug point here. Let me place a debug point here, right? And let me, so this is a bugger which you can actually use for debugging. Yeah, so your debug point came here, and now what you are doing is you are assigning your value. Press F6. Yeah, now you can see I is your 10 now, right? Now what we are doing is we are dividing 10 with 2, which means Z should be 5. You can see Z value is 5. Now we are in runtime now. We have executed our program and we are in runtime, but in debug mode. Now, so your array got initialized. You can see array contains 195 and 205, right? You can see here that 0th value is 195 and 1 value is 295. Right? Now what we are trying to do is we are trying to do something which is out of my reach. Now let me press F6. Can you see it directly went to something called array out of index, and it will print this array out of index, and it will immediately come out of this, right? And it will do something else. Fine. So these are we got I am in exception and this. Now let us say you don't have this. Let me just kill this up. Let us say you don't have something which is specific to something. Now let me run this again. You can see a generic exception will be executed because it is not arithmetic, it is not something else. So that's why it directly came to something which is generic exception, right? So that is how your program executes on specific errors. Fine. Now let us
I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
So if you are using exception, right, instead of arithmetic or array index out of bounds, right? If you are using exception, it won't catch that thing, like the exact error message, or
no, it will catch the exact error message. Again, you have to check each and every message here. You have to say, you have to do something called, let us say, string. Let me just take this. Yeah, that was a good question. S or some except is equal to e dot get message, let us say, right? So here you have to check each and every time whether exception dot equals, right, equals, right, your something called divide by 0. You getting what I'm saying? So you have to, you can handle any type of exception here, but only problem is, so based on your message you have to bifurcate your exception, which is not recommended. This type of handling is not recommended, because we already have something called specific exceptions, right? But your question was right, you can handle any type of exception using this class, but only thing why we are using this is something like this. Let us say if you are getting some arithmetic exception, right, which means you got an exception here. Even if you got an exception here, I don't want to skip something called x. So here what I'll do, I'll just say I want x at least to be 50, right, and let the z be 0. Right, now when your array out of index came, which means it is something which you are getting here, right? I don't want to do anything. Let me just run up here. Okay. You can see, okay, sorry, let me just say 0 and some. When any exception happens here, right, when any exception happen, something happened here, which is z is equal to I divided by 0, but there is no problem in next part of code. But when any exception happens here, it directly went to something called arithmetic exception, and here I'm making sure whatever happens, I am making my x as 50. So that's why you got x here 50. So this is how you're handling your exception specifically. When some specific exception happens, I want to do some action. When some other specific happens, I want to do some other action. So here I may say z is equal to some 75. I can do that. When any exception happens here, I want to make my z 75, where you can see your, let me just say 2 here and some 5 here. When I run this, you can see z as 75, because even if exception happened here, so I want to make my z something, right? So that's how it works. Fine, Shiva?
okay.
Yeah.
If there are two exceptions, right, it won't print out, right?
What do you mean by two exceptions?
Okay,
same part of code.
Yeah, so let's say if I equals to 0 and also
okay, 5 here,
if
right?
it's out of bound, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because when any exception happens here, right, it won't even go to next piece of code, right? Which means in try catch, right, at first exception itself it will come out.
Oh, okay. Yeah? So
yeah,
it will only show one exception at that point.
Exactly, yeah, right? Because why it will show only one exception is, only when exception happens, the complete execution will stop there itself. It won't even move to next, right?
Okay. Yeah.
That's the problem ends there itself, right? Yeah, so this is how we go for something called exceptions here, which is your file exceptions. Now, your specific exceptions. Now even here,
so one more thing.
Yeah, sure, go on.
So as soon as it shows that this is the exception, it will print the next value, like the variable value, and that's it. It will stop there.
Here you mean here?
Yeah. So after 75, like that's it. It stops there.
Yeah, it stops here, and it will come to so it stops here, and it will come to next piece of code, which is try catch ends here, right? Let us say try catch ends
which is
here.
outside the catch.
Perfect. Which is outside something called try catch, right? Your try started here, and actually your catch is ending. This catch is ending here. This catch is ending here. This catch is ending here. Which is, this is your starting point, and this is your starting point and ending point. So if any exception happens here, it will just print it out, and it will come out of catch, and then execution will start again. Yeah.
That's good.
Now here you have to remember one thing. You should always specify your child exception classes at starting and then go for higher, which means if I define this exception class here, the placing of your exception class is again very important. Can you see here what I did? I just placed my super class, which is exception, at top at the first, and then I mentioned something called specific. You can see here this is not reachable. It says unreachable code. Can you see why it is unreachable? Whenever any exception happens, it will just go here and it knows that yes, that exception is again a type of your exception. So every time it will just execute this and it will come out. It will never go to this. That's why it says not reachable. So that's why always make sure to write a child exception first and then go on the higher level. Even if you come to this IO, right, is IO. Under IO exception you have something called file not found and file oversays something, right, which means you have to first handle file not found and then IO exception. You can see here, let me just write out. I'm not going to do anything on files here. When we come to files, I'll explain those exceptions there. Let me just write for some heads up here. Let me just say you want to catch file not found. File not found. You can get directly file not found. Let me say F, right? And we have one more catch, which is CAT catch block, which is, let us say, IO, right? IO exception. Some I. Right, so here we did IO exception here, right? And what we are doing is we just write some, so we're getting some exception here, we are getting some runtime unreachable code again, which means file not found is child is never. Okay, let me run this outside this. It again says unreachable. Why does it unreachable here? When I don't have this, okay, never throws this. Let me just take file here, just some file. Okay, that was a problem. Some file. Don't get into anything here, guys. We'll come to that, because see here, it is your Java application is directly checking here. It says unreachable code file not exception. Why it is not thrown? If obj dot exits, again it says file not found is not. So let me just say obj dot something like get absolute file. File not found. So it says file not found, or let us say file output stream. It won't give. Let me just say file file already exists, because if I'm not doing anything with input output streams, it won't. Let me just take input stream or buffer stream. When I say this, I'm gonna handle something called IO exception here, right? It accepts this exception, unreachable code block. Okay, we need some we have to write again the complete program here, because there is no exception can happen here. That's why it is just saying it is not, right? Or let me just say some obj dot I want to write something. Let me just say take up this and just say never mind. Okay, let's not get into much of this, right? So the basic thing here is, what I wanted to convey is, right, we should always, when we come to file exceptions, we'll go in depth of these exceptions, right? We'll be seeing each and everything, but only message here is always try to use some child exception classes first and then move on to your parent classes. That's the only thing, which means you should go in like, exception should be the last statement which you have to handle, and then your specific the last, and before that go for specific exceptions. And again, even if you are using something called specific, don't ever forget to give this exception, because exception, even your unhandleable exception can also happen, right? Which maybe these catches will never be able to catch up, right? So that's why even your that case should be handled, right? So that is what we have, something called multiple catches, and for all these multiple catches, again you will be having only one finally. You can't write for one try. I'll be giving these combinations tomorrow, right? Not to worry, right? So as of now, let's stop till here, right, where we have seen multiple catches, and see more topics on exception handling tomorrow. Fine, guys. Any doubt over here?
Yeah, I have one question.
Sure, Shiva. Yeah.
So basically, you're using arithmetic exception because you want to print something if that something goes wrong at that point, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is not like I'm printing something. If this exception happens, I want to do some action in that way.
Yeah. I mean, you want to do something, right?
Exactly.
So that's why you're using those specific.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a quick question.
Yeah, Ron?
Yeah, what's the difference between the methods get stack trace and print stack trace?
Yeah, get stack. Yeah, it is like so stack. E dot. Oh, sorry, A dot. So print stack trace. What it does is it'll directly print it in your console, which is if you are using any server, right? If you are using any Tomcat server or Apache server, if you have deployed it, right, so there you will get the output directly in your console. Fine. When I say a.print stack, right, which means it will directly give you the output, and will you don't have to do something called print it up. It will give the complete exception. It will give the internal APS. Stack trace is nothing but it will give you the internal level of exception. Let me just give this. Let me run this up first. You can see it will give you each and every part. We have already done something like arm in arithmetic exception divided by 0, but again it says where it has been done. So what is the method? So this exception, when I say print stack trace in a sense, it will give you the whole tree structure. So this exception happened in something called method 1. You can see that at, and again if this method is called from main, it will see main. Stack trace will give you the complete tree structure from where you are getting your exception. Fine. And stack trace is common, and get.
So this is like the same method that's.
Yeah, stack trace is common. Yeah, stack trace is common. But only thing is, get stack trace will give you the message into something. Print will let me just say get stack trace. This is out of right. Oops, sorry. When I say get stack trace, right, it will print you the actual stack element where it is throwing some element here, which is get stack trace. Oops, let's say a dot g. You can see get stack trace will give you the trace element, which is an array of stack elements, which you have to trace to. I mean, you have to actually, what you have to do is, let me just take it as, for logging purpose you will go for something called messages. First thing, let me just say stack trace element.
I don't understand this one.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, right? For each stack trace element, right? Stack trace element dot. We'll just say get something like method, get line number, or what what is we have something called line number, stack element, get method name, with method name, where we have got, yeah, let me run this. I'll explain this. Okay, it is not displaying. I'm in arithmetic exception, and trace element throwable, and it should give you the complete stack trace element, and we are printing some method names here. So whenever you get to stack trace, you should print each and every method. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not printing it here. So VRR and just say this. You can see here I'm getting what is the trace element. Stack trace will give you where the exception happens, and it will give you the complete tree, right, of met. So let us say I have one more method which is met2, let us say met2, and I'm calling met2 from here and met1 from here, which is static again. Just say met1. So exception happened at 1, and it was called from 2, and it was called from main. Run this. You can see exception happened at 1, and 1 was called from 2, and 2 was called from main. The basic usage of stack trace. So the basic what you have to see is what is a stack trace. Stack trace will give you the specific items where the exception happened, and this stack trace is mainly useful when you are using something called your APIs. Like, if you are using directly something called JDBC, right, and if you want to know what actually happened, in which library of JDBC happened some error, so that at that place you will be using something called stack trace. But as of now, what you are doing is, whatever you are writing, you are not using any third-party libraries, right? So at that point you don't have to go for that. But it's always better to actually get this get the print stack and the print whole thing in a log or a console, right? Yeah, you understood, Ron?
Yeah. Clear. Thank
Shiva,
you.
for your information, what we were doing till now is, so Ron's question was, see, till now we have seen something called, if you remember, we just said e.get message, right? I'm sorry. So e in the sense this variable of your exception class, which is a.get message. So when you say get message, right, it will give you direct exception. What is the exception? That's it, right? Right, Shiva?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Now stack trace is nothing but it will give you the complete stack of, complete internal tree where the exception happened and all, right?
Oh, okay.
That is nothing but a stack. Main word here is stack trace. Either you can get a stack trace, or you can directly say a.print stack trace. What it does is it will directly print your stack trace to something, right? Though this printing will be done in your console. If you do this, you can have some you can see here you have something called streams, right? Print streams. You can actually write the same thing into a file also, right, using the print streams, fine. So this is something which we use for logging bugs, logging exceptions, fine. Yeah. Okay, so was that clear, Ron?
Perfectly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. So any more doubts? Vamsi, Surinder, Purushottam. Yeah? So if if everything is clear.
That's clear.
Okay, cool. So if everything is clear, let's wind up here, right? And let's check out more exception classes tomorrow, right? Or more type of exceptions and different things tomorrow. Fine, guys.
Sure.
Okay, then let me just wind
Fine.
up.
Thank you.
Thank you, and see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Yeah.
All right. Have a
Have a
great
good day.
day.
Bye bye,
Bye.
Shiva. Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye.